In the shadows of history, a dark chapter unfolds as we delve into the harrowing realm of witchcraft and its punishments. In a time when fear cast long shadows and superstition reigned, accused witches faced a chilling ordeal that defied reason and compassion. This captivating journey takes us into the heart of a time where witches danced with the devil, broomsticks defied gravity, and the punishment they faced was as haunting as the legends themselves. Join us today as we unravel the enigma of witches and the grim fate that awaited those accused of witchcraft. Throughout history, beliefs about witchcraft were often rooted in superstition, fear, and a lack of scientific understanding. Witches were commonly believed to possess supernatural powers, which were attributed to their supposed pacts with the devil or other malevolent spirits. People often believed that witches could cause harm, illness, and misfortune through their magical abilities. Accusations of witchcraft could arise from various factors, such as unusual behavior, social isolation, or simply being an outsider in a community. Local conflicts, personal vendettas, or societal tensions could also lead to accusations. Witch trials were characterized by a lack of due process, and individuals accused of witchcraft were often subjected to harsh interrogation methods, including torture, to extract confessions. Many accused witches were women, and accusations of witchcraft were sometimes used as a means to control and suppress women's autonomy and independence. The image of the witch often incorporated negative stereotypes about women who defied societal norms. Some women accused of witchcraft were skilled in herbalism and traditional healing practices. These skills, along with their knowledge of natural remedies, could be misconstrued as evidence of witchcraft, especially in times when medical knowledge was limited. Witch hunts and beliefs in witchcraft were not consistent across all regions and cultures. The intensity of witch trials and the perception of witches varied significantly between different parts of Europe and other parts of the world. The punishments for those accused of witchcraft could range from fines and public shaming to severe forms of torture and even execution. The nature of the punishment often depended on the prevailing legal and religious authorities in a given region. Public shaming of accused witches was a common practice during witch hunts and trials. These forms of humiliation and degradation were often intended to both punish the accused and serve as a warning to others. Public shaming aimed to strip the accused of their dignity and social standing, further isolating them from their communities. Some common forms of public shaming that accused witches might have endured include the Walk of Shame, where accused witches might be paraded through town or village streets, often bound or in rags, as a way to expose them to public ridicule and scorn. This process would subject them to insults, jeers, and sometimes even physical abuse from onlookers. An accused witch could be placed in a wooden framework known as the pillory or stocks, which restrained their hands and sometimes their head. Passers-by would then have the opportunity to hurl insults, rotten food, or other objects at them, further degrading their dignity. Accused witches might be subjected to public floggings or whippings, often in the town square while crowds looked on. This physical punishment, combined with the public spectacle, aimed to break their will and force confessions. Those who were accused of being witches could be branded with symbols associated with witchcraft or the devil. These marks, often burned onto their skin, served as permanent badges of shame and would stigmatize them within their community. Accused witches might be subjected to mock trials or ceremonies that mimicked actual legal proceedings. These events were intended to publicly highlight their alleged guilt, even before an official trial took place. In some cases, an accused witch was formally excommunicated from their church community. This spiritual isolation was a form of public shaming, as it cut them off from the religious and social fabric of their lives. Accused witches were sometimes coerced into making public confessions or apologies, admitting to their alleged wrongdoing. These admissions were often delivered in public spaces or during church services. While tarring and feathering are not exclusive to witch trials, this form of punishment involved covering the accused in hot tar and then feathers. It was painful, humiliating, and often resulted in physical discomfort and social ostracism. These forms of public shaming were intended to break the accused's spirit, make them confess to witchcraft, and serve as a warning to others. They were part of a larger strategy to create an atmosphere of fear and conformity, where anyone suspected of deviating from societal norms would face severe consequences. Witches accused of practicing witchcraft were often subjected to various forms of torture during medieval times and beyond. These torturous methods were aimed at extracting confessions and proving their alleged connections to the devil or supernatural forces. The severity and prevalence of these methods varied by region and era. However, here are some common forms of torture that accused witches might have endured. The strappado. This method involved binding the accused's hands behind their back and then suspending them from a rope or pulley. The victim would be raised and then suddenly dropped, causing excruciating pain as their body jerked to a stop, often dislocating shoulders and causing severe physical distress. Thumb screws and leg vices. Torturers used devices that could crush or apply pressure to the accused's limbs, particularly the thumbs and legs, causing immense pain and, in some cases, permanent damage. The rack. The accused would be stretched out on a wooden frame, and torturers would turn a crank to gradually stretch their body. This caused extreme pain and could dislocate joints and even lead to death in some cases. The Iron Maiden. A metal coffin-like device with spikes on the inside, the Iron Maiden would close upon the accused, causing the spikes to penetrate their body. While this form of torture is often associated with medieval dungeons, historical evidence for its widespread use in witch trials is limited. Dunking or swimming tests. Accused witches were tied to a chair and submerged in water. If they floated, which was believed to be due to the water rejecting a witch, they were considered guilty. If they sank, they were deemed innocent, but often drowned in the process. The pair of anguish. This instrument had segments that could be expanded using a screw mechanism. It would be inserted into various bodily orifices, causing extreme pain and damage. Sleep deprivation and solitary confinement. Some accused witches were subjected to prolonged periods of sleep deprivation and isolation. This psychological torment could break down their resistance and lead to confessions. Execution for accused witches during witch hunts and trials could be gruesome and varied depending on the time period, region, and prevailing cultural beliefs. Some of the common methods of execution that accused witches might have faced include burning at the stake. One of the most infamous methods of execution for witches was being burned at the stake. Accused witches were often tied to a stake with bundles of wood at their feet. Once ignited, the flames would consume them in a horrifying spectacle that aimed to purify their souls through fire. Hanging. Accused witches were sometimes hanged like common criminals. They might be hanged from a gallows in a public square, serving as a warning to others. This method was often seen as a more humane alternative to burning. Decapitation. In regions where decapitation was a common method of execution, witches might have faced beheading with a sword or an axe. This method was relatively quick and meant to ensure a swift death. Crushing. In some areas, a method known as pressing or peine forte et dure was used. The accused was laid flat on the ground, and heavy stones or weights were placed on their body until they could no longer bear the weight, resulting in a slow and agonizing death. Strangulation. Accused witches might be strangled to death, either by manual strangulation or by using a garrote or noose. This method could be particularly brutal and drawn out. Stabbing or beating. In rare cases, accused witches were stabbed or beaten to death. These methods were often less formal and more brutal, driven by the intense fear and hostility surrounding witch accusations. It's important to recognize that the methods of torture and execution varied widely based on the specific legal and religious traditions of each region. Additionally, the severity of punishment for accused witches was often influenced by local beliefs, politics, and the prevailing social climate of the time. Many innocent individuals suffered and lost their lives due to these practices during a time when ignorance and superstition held sway over rationality and justice. This dark chapter in history shows us how people can be driven to extremes by paranoia and ignorance. We should remember the suffering of those unjustly accused and lost in this era. It's crucial to learn from the past and promote tolerance, justice, and the pursuit of truth over prejudice.